and welcome. We are at the lesson 5 and you're ready to learn something special. Today, not only will we learn some letters, but we will learn some special sounds. You will find out about voiced and voiceless consonants of the Russian language, and you will learn some essential reading rules that will help you master your Russian. Okay, so today's lesson is not about letters, but rather about the sounds they make. And I'd like you to look at the examples, and we will practice them together. I will explain some special features of some sounds. So, zond, son. You see that the words are quite similar, and what is different? Of course, the consonant at the beginning. So let's practice this simple articulation exercise. Touch your neck, put your hands right here on your neck, and try to say the letter z, z, z. You will be able to feel that your vocal cords are vibrating. Z, zond, zond, right? However, if you say the letter s, the sound s, s, you see and you can feel that your vocal cords are kind of silent, right? They do not move. This is the difference between voiced and voiceless, or sometimes they are called unvoiced consonants. Consonant sounds, to be precise, right? So if a sound is made with special vibration of the sound, we call it voiced. Zond, v, d, g, right? But if it is pronounced without this vibration, the sound is called voiceless. Voiceless. S, t, k, right? Vibration is not that felt right on your neck. So that's the difference, and we are going to study some special features of the sounds in this video. So, in Russian, there are 11 pairs of voiced and unvoiced consonants, and here you can see voiced and voiceless hard versions. Later you will find out about the soft versions as well, but today we will remain focused on letters and the actual sounds right here. So I'm going to read the pairs. Please repeat after me. That will be easy for you to practice. B, P, V, F, G, K, D, T, Ž, Š, Z, S. Mind you that I pronounce sounds rather than letters, and you see that the type of articulation, like where the sound is made, is the same. For example, b, p. I make the sound with my lips only, and I only add vibration. B, you see, lips right here, b, and p. The where, like the place of articulation is the same, but the quality, the voice, like the measure of voice is different, right? B, P. Let's have some examples. So the difference between voiced and voiceless consonants can be really crucial for meaning. So there are pairs of words where this difference makes the word different, right? Like, so really pay attention to it and try to pronounce the sounds correctly. So let's read the examples. Бабочка, бабочка, butterfly. Папочка, like this nice way of calling your dad, yeah, daddy. Бабочка, папочка. You see? The only difference is here, right? These sounds, voiced and voiceless, and it makes a difference. Ваза, фаза. Ваза, фаза. right? You can. Well, the examples feature these sounds at the beginning of a word, however they can be seen in other positions, but this is just for your information so that you can see it clearly, right? The difference. Годы, коды, right? This g, k. Годы, коды. The next line, дом, том. Tom also means a volume in Russian, but it can be just a name. Dom, tom. You see that these words are different only because of one single sound at the beginning. Dom, tom. The next line features some more differences, but to see the same sounds in positions, well, it will be useful. Жук, you know this word already. Жук, шутка. Ж, ш. Жук, шутка. And the last pair, familiar from the previous slide. Зонт, сон. Зонт, сон. The word zont is really helpful for all people and for students studying in St. Petersburg because it rains a lot here, right? So you will know this word. Zont, son, right? Now let's see how these sounds are pronounced. Okay, so from the voiced and voiceless pairs, we proceed to reading rules. The first rule is devoicing of the final consonant. This rule is essential for the Russian language. Please pay attention, stay focused, and it will really improve your Russian. It will improve your understanding of the spoken speech. So, voiced consonants, the ones which are produced with this vibration, are pronounced as voiceless at the end of the words. So again, if you see a voiced consonant at the very end of a word, it will become unvoiced, like no voice, voiceless at the end of the word. Let's study the examples. Zub. You hear what I'm saying? So you see this b voiced, but it's at the end of a word. So I pronounce this b as p. Zub, zub. The next one, flag. And again, you see this familiar letter, g, and you are tempted to say it like in English, flag, right? Flag, but no, it's at the end of the word, so g becomes k, right? You study the pairs and you choose the counterpart, the voiceless counterpart for that letter. Flag, flag. A longer word, город, город, a city or a town, город. Again, it ends with d, but rather than pronouncing it as d, you say it as t at the very end of a word. Город, город, right? Garage, garage. Ž becomes sh. Garage. Рассказ, рассказ. Z becomes s. Рассказ, рассказ. And this surname, you can see that a lot. It's a very typical Russian surname. Ivanov. Ivanov. That is why sometimes you see that Russian surnames are spelled with ov at the end, right? In Latin or English spelling. That is because the final v is pronounced as f all the time. Ivanov. Now let's do it again. I will erase all the prompts and we'll read together. Repeat after me. I'm sure you can do it. Зуб, флаг, город, гараж, рассказ, Ivanov. That is the final devoicing. Again, you can see that. If a word can be different from another word with the first consonant, the final consonant also makes a difference. And sometimes you see a word spelled, right? You can see, okay, I'm looking at these two words and I think, all right, these ones are different and these ones are different. But different letters, not sounds. The final sounds will be the same, b and p. Zup, soup. You see what a drastic difference, right? You're talking about a tooth or about a soup. Zup, soup. The only difference in the beginning. And you may ask right here, like, oh my God, how do I know which letter to spell at the end? If I hear a word and I hear that it's devoiced at the very end of this word, how do I know? Well, you will learn to actually change the word to make it plural. You also will have to consult your dictionary, unfortunately, but I'm sure you can master it. So far, remember the reading rule, okay? Now we are going to learn how to pronounce consonant clusters. The first thing is what is a consonant cluster? Well, basically a cluster is a group of consonants coming together one after another in a word. In Russian, it's really common. 2, 3, even 4 consonants can follow one another, and it's really easy for native speakers to pronounce them. So you will learn too. I'm sure you can do it. So if you see a group of consonants, a cluster of consonants, the final element in this cluster determines the pronunciation of the whole group. So you know, one element affects all the others, and this is the final element in the cluster. So, for example, rule number 1, if your final element is voiceless, everything will be pronounced as voiceless, like, you know, voiceless, voiceless. This is called assimilation of sounds. It's easier for a person to pronounce a group of sounds that follow the same pattern, right? If you use your vibration, if you use your vocal cords, if you don't use them, it's easier to stick to one technique, right? So let's have a look at the examples. The first word, ложка, ложка. Let's identify a cluster. You see a group, 2 consonants together. The final one is devoiced, k. It will affect the previous consonants. So, zh, voiced, will become sh because of k, right? So instead of saying ложка, you say it as ложка, ложка. Another example, автобус. Where is the cluster? Oh, right here. Автобус, v and t coming together, a group of 2. Your final consonant is voiceless and it will affect v. Автобус rather than автобус, right? Автобус, автобус. And one more example with k. Ошибка, ошибка. This is our cluster. Your final letter is k. You already remember that it's voiceless. It will affect b as well. And instead of b, we say its voiceless counterpart, p. Ошибка, ошибка. Let's say it again. Let's read it together. Repeat after me. Ложка, автобус, ошибка. When your final element is, on the other hand, voiced, you can figure it out that a voiced consonant will call for a voiced counterpart, right? So again, if your final element is voiced, it affects all the previous sounds before that, all the previous consonants. Let's study the examples. The first one is вокзал. Вокзал. Where is our cluster? Right here. K, Z. Your final element is voiced, Z, Z. So instead of K, we say G. Вокзал. Вокзал. Remember the vowel reduction, or is A, вокзал, rather than вокзал. Oh my god, it's really difficult to say that. Вокзал. Вокзал. Вокзал, right? The next one, familiar word, football. This is our cluster. B is voiced, and it will affect T, rather than football. Football. Like first you have no vibration, then you add it. It's too difficult for us. We keep it lazy, we keep it cool. We say football. Football. You see, it's D instead of T. Football. Football. And another word, you will hear it a lot, сделай. Сделай. Like, do it. This is our cluster. D is voiced. It will affect your first letter. Instead of сделай, it's really difficult to say. You keep it the same, right? Keep it simple. Сделай. Сделай. Let's practice again. Repeat after me, please. Вокзал. Футбол. Сделай. Good? I'm sure you could do it. This consonant cluster rule applies not only to words, but rather to phrases and combinations with some functional words. For example, prepositions and nouns, particles, and some other words. You can see it all over the place. Let's study this really useful phrase. Как дела? Как дела? How are you doing? Right? Как дела? How are you? How are the things? And you can see that these words, the word как, how, is functional. It's pronounced together with the next word, and our voiced d will affect k right here. It will become как дела? Как дела? Как дела? Хорошо. Как дела? Let's study the example with the preposition. Я иду в парк. В means in or to. So, я иду в парк. Preposition pronounced together with the noun. The noun starts with the voiceless consonant, so v becomes voiceless. Я иду в парк rather than в парк. There is absolutely no pause right here, guys, right? These words are pronounced together. No в парк, but together в парк, в парк. So you can see that this is a cluster of voiceless consonant sounds. Let's do it again. Как дела? Я иду в парк. Got it? Good. Of course, it's Russian, so there are exceptions. So, if you see some unpaired voiceless consonants, they are L, M, N, R, these letters, right? These unpaired voiceless consonants, sometimes they're called sonants because you can actually kind of sing in them, like not exactly, but very similar to that. They do not make a preceding unvoiced consonant voiced. They cannot affect it. So no matter what is before L, M, N, R, it is pronounced as it should in the alphabet. Let's have a look. Plan. Right? Our cluster here, L is voiced, but again, doesn't affect anything. Plan. P. Not bulan. Plan. Plan. Смотри. Two clusters here. We have M and we have R. They don't affect anything. Both consonants remain unvoiced. Смотри. Смотри. Look. Like, oh my God. Look. Смотри. Снова. Снова. Again, this is our cluster. N. N doesn't affect anything. Смотри rather than смотри or снова. I know that those who speak Italian would be tempted to do that. No, please don't. Смотри. Снова. And frukt. Frukt. R doesn't affect our F. It remains the same. Frukt. Frukt. Let's read it again. Please repeat after me. План. Смотри. Снова. Frukt. Practice again, right? I'm sure it will be helpful. The second exception to this consonant cluster rule is about the letter V. Even though V is voiced and it has a counterpart, voiceless, F, and it does devoices to F at the end of words and before voiceless consonant, V itself doesn't make a preceding consonant voiced. So V cannot affect your previous consonant. Let's compare. Let's look at the example. It will be easier for you to figure out. So we have the word автобус. Автобус. So look, this is our cluster. Look at the final letter. Final letter is T. It's voiceless. So V right here will become F, right? Автобус, автобус. But in our next example, квартира, квартира. Look at this cluster. The cluster finishes with V, and when we look at this, it doesn't become квартира, right? You kind of feel that it should, but no, this is the exception, right? V itself cannot make the previous consonant voiced. So it remains квартира, a flat or an apartment. So let's read it again. Автобус, but квартира, квартира. You will see this in the word that you should probably learn, до свидания, like goodbye, до свидания. Look, we pronounce it together. It's a preposition plus noun, да, because of the reduction, до свидания. And then this is our cluster. This is V. V cannot affect anything, so it is до свидания, да? До свидания, rather than свидания. До свидания. Goodbye. See you. До свидания. До свидания. Practice it to make it perfect. Okay, so in today's video, you learned about voiced and voiceless consonants. You learned the way to spot them in a phrase. You learned how to pronounce them in a phrase, in a sentence. You also learned about consonant clusters. You learned some reading rules. And most importantly, you learned the correct pronunciation of this essential phrase, как дела?